Sustainable and more efficient and smarter terminals. Today I have with me in the podcast Yvo Saanen, Managing Director of Portwise. Welcome.
Morning.
Yvo, good to have you in the
Thanks,
studio.
Leon.
Looking forward to a conversation about terminals and about efficiency in that part. I was looking back at your background. Of course, I know a lot of what you have been doing. A PhD, that is where you started off, looking at robotics in terminals.
Yeah.
And then you moved into, don't only do it, but also start doing it, and you started TBA and
Exactly.
Portwise. But
Yeah.
maybe it's good if you do a small introduction of yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Thanks for the kind invitation. Gladly here to have this discussion. So almost 30 years in the business, helping our customers, mainly container terminals, but also other logistic facilities around the world in being smarter, being more efficient, and also more sustainable. We go back to the early days when we started TBA, 1996, just fresh out of university, together with a good friend of mine, Klaus-Peter van Til. We started a company and tried to give logistics advice. We thought we could do that. And during the course of the first years, we were put on the path of container terminals needing automation. This was in the late 90s. Then I also started my PhD, where I focused on how to automate container terminals, which at that time was a novelty. Only ECT did it in those early 90s. And since then, a lot of terminals have been automated, introducing safer, more sustainable, more efficient technology that these days becomes very popular. Only recently we see countries like China, the Middle East, but also South and North America embracing this kind of technology.
Cool. So automating, taking people out of the loop, is that the main thing, or is it the throughput that is pushing it? What is the driver in this automation?
Yeah, so of course many people think this is about taking people away out of operation and saving costs, but it's so much more, and it starts actually with taking away people from hazardous situations. Handling containers, having heavy cargo is generally dangerous, and people die around the world in doing so. So if you look at automated terminals around the world, I don't know any of these terminals where lost life had to be taken. So they are a lot safer. They generally bring technology which works 24/7 around the clock in a very consistent manner, which is very important for their customers, the shipping lines, the railway operators, the truckers, that there is consistency and reliability in service levels. Furthermore, there is a lot of optimization possible. It's driven by systems which perform the way you program them. So they provide something you can actually much better control. Recently, around the world, one of the drivers is actually a shortage of labor. These days, the new generations don't want to sit anymore 8 hours in a cabin by themselves just operating a machine. They rather have different type of jobs. Even in China, I remember very well when we did our first project in China, which was Qingdao 5-6 years ago, maybe a bit longer. I asked, why are you want to introduce automation here? And of course, part of it was prestige. They wanted to follow, they wanted to do the same as what other countries were doing. But one of the main drivers was shortage of labor in China. Labor costs, of course, going up, but they're still at a very low level. But they just couldn't find people. And when people were employed, after 3 to 6 months, they were gone again. They were in search of nicer jobs. So they were training, and which of course also caused a lot of damage, a lot of risk, etc. So a lot of different drivers for automation than purely saving costs.
I think that is something you see in ports and working in ports in general. It's really hard to find the people who are willing to do the job 24/7 in that part.
Yeah.
It had this way of you were really proud if you could do that, but people are perceiving that completely different. That part. interesting point is, like you mentioned, like automation being driven by customers who want to have predictability and reliability on that sense. And then the other word you had was optimization. The focus of your company is really on terminals, but a terminal is just one node in a network.
Exactly.
How does that work? How does that how is it connected, and how is this smarter terminal taking an important role in those networks?
Yeah, you can imagine that a container terminal combines or brings together, I should say, very large scale intercontinental shipping, ships with 10, 15, 20,000 containers, and connects that to a very small scale mode of transportation. The biggest, for instance, here in Rotterdam, barging, but in many places they have very limited barging, so it comes to trains and to trucks with 1, 2, maybe 20, 40 containers. So the container terminal acts as a buffer, a very big buffer between this large-scale transportation and small-scale transportation. This buffer is in scale, but also in time. Some goods arrive 15 days, 7 days before something gets on a ship. Others are just in time. And a terminal acts like a sponge. You know, it takes up all these containers and then distributes them again. Without that, actually, I was preparing some materials on the history of how terminals came about. And it used to be that railways were inside the dock. So they would be directly at the crane, directly from the ship onto the train. But these days, with the volumes that are being transported, that's not possible anymore. So you need this big buffer in between to cater for the different needs of different types of customers.
And what is the biggest challenge you see in those terminals? What is
the biggest challenge? That's a difficult question. There are all kinds of challenges. One of the challenges that terminals have been, let's say, scratching their head around is the increase in scale. And the ships ever becoming bigger, that means you also need bigger equipment. So you buy cranes that can handle a certain type of ship, and then 2, 3, 4 years later, again, the cranes are too small because the shipping lines have bought another bigger size of ships, and even now they're discussing 26,000 TEU ships. So they're still looking at further increase of scale and economies of scale. So that is all doable to buy new equipment when the volumes are increasing, because more volume brings in more revenues. Generally, EBITDAs in terminals are quite good. So increasing volume also fuels the bank account so you can invest in new equipment. But for quite a long time, a lot of regions have been seeing very, very modest growth, if growth at all. And then it becomes very difficult to buy new equipment, replace equipment which is not yet at end of life, economic life, and it's still buying new stuff because your main customer, the shipping line, comes with ships you cannot handle. And that goes from the biggest terminals, like Rotterdam has, to the smallest terminals, which are in the small towns and ports. They also have to increase their scale as bigger vessels that used to be the biggest go to smaller trades, and those ones go to even smaller trades. So this cascading effect hits all the ports. So when the main shipping routes get the bigger ships, it means all the shipping routes will get bigger ships. And that requires very significant investment, not only in cranes, but also, for instance, in strengthening key walls, which is a very big investment and a very big disruption. So I would say has been a challenge for a very long time. Of course, we had the impact of COVID with spiking dwell times. I mean, dwell times in many places went up from regular 5 to 7 days to something like double. So you need suddenly double the space. Where do you get it from? Another effect of COVID was that people realized we became too much just in time. So all the supply chains, all the waste was being cut out of the supply chain, focusing on just in time. But when done, then a part of the supply chain is disrupted. you suddenly cannot produce your end products anymore. Some of the components are missing because one of those, there's no inventory to cater for that, which meant people started to increase their inventories again, which again meant longer dwell times. So, and increased volumes. So it was a very difficult period where I would say the reaction of this industry was overinvestment in more capacity. When things got back to, I would say, normal, lower dwell times again, a normal hinterland connection, they suddenly saw that they actually overinvested, which, again, created new dynamics.
Really interesting. You mentioned also like the just-in-time, having invested too heavily on just-in-time. If we look at shipping in general, just-in-time is something that in the world of port calls, everyone is looking for. How can we arrange for just-in-time in that part? How do you see that movement? Will there be a pushback given the fact that there will be supply chains, or will the buffers already start catering for, and you still can go for just-in-time, but you will add a buffer on top of it?
That's a very good question. I mean, if you look at the interaction between shipping lines and terminals, then there is a great deal of inefficiency. So a terminal is best utilized when the quay is always full. Well, we don't see any terminals where the quay is only full, maybe Singapore. That's one of the exceptions in the world. They are so dominant that they can allow to be occupied 80-85% of the time. But most terminals have berth occupancies of less than 50%. Your most expensive resource is only used 50% of the time, which is crazy. And why is this? This is because of the arrival pattern of vessels is so unpredictable. Shipping lines still demanding berth on arrival that you need to keep space available. Otherwise, you will have ships waiting. So a terminal is benefiting from very reliable arrivals, where you can basically create a schedule throughout the week, which fully utilizes all your expensive assets, cranes, yard space, yard cranes, what have you. But the opposite is true. And actually the trend is even in the wrong direction. The arrival patterns get more erratic, less predictable. So utilization of assets actually is not improving, but getting worse. So what do we do about that?
Yeah,
that's the key question. How do we get more predictable? How we get, let's say, the information flow between terminal and shipping line so well organized that on the one hand, the shipping line can optimize their processes, and on the other hand, the terminal can optimize their processes. And that's a challenge where also tech play is playing a role, right? In improving the information, because the mutual information exchange is seriously hampered. The type of information they're getting from each other is simply not in order, which leads to sub-optimization on both sides.
Any idea why this information is so suboptimal? What made this happen, and why is there also maybe too limited effort put onto it? What is it contributing? Why is it easy for people? What is your take on that one?
Well, I would say if I start with your third question, is it easy to fix this? I would say from a technical point of view, yes, it's quite easy to fix this. We can predict when the vessel will arrive. We know what the flexibility is. We also know when this berth will be available. So I think from a technical point of view, you can provide solutions which provide all the information to cut out the unnecessary waste. From a stakeholder point of view, from all parties involved, is it easy to realize? Maybe not so. Because there are players, agents, forwarders who play a role in dealing with the information, who are mainly sitting on the information, having limited visibility. Maybe they don't have the tools readily available to provide the information and exchange that information. I think generally the network itself provides complexity. Most terminals serve multiple lines. It comes together. They maybe fighting for the same windows at terminals. So how do you organize? How do you orchestrate that? But I generally feel that we can do a lot to make it much, much better than today, to save on the one hand in bunkering, in fuel cost for the shipping lines, arriving at terminals when there's actually space available, and on the other hand for terminals to actually fill their berth much better and get better use of their assets. And yeah, right now that information exchange is not happening, or not happening enough to make it efficient.
And if you think about, okay, this is something we would like to change, what would you, or do you consider as a starting point? Is that the terminal? Is that the shipping line? Is that the conversation between the terminal and the shipping line? Or should we even go further down the line?
Well, I certainly think the communication between shipping line and terminal is essential. To get that flowing, I mean, those two parties are the main stakeholders in getting this resolved. Both suffer. Shipping lines sail too fast, arrive, and they have to wait. Or they sail too slow, and then the terminal has an empty space, and then the terminal has no business, or has equipment or labor scheduled to operate a vessel which is not arriving. And I've seen that happen so many times. A lot of waste. So I think they need to work together. And a good example is the hub cooperation that APMT and Maersk have organized already for quite a long time, where they really focus on a number of hubs within their network, where they really try to optimize from both sides. So I think that is required. The shipping line nor the terminal can solve it by themselves. Second would be the shipping line driving it, because they are calling multiple terminals. And the terminals can only, I would say, facilitate in providing better information to the shipping lines, because they can steer. They have flexibility in organizing their journey. But on the other hand, terminals can also work faster or even slower, because sometimes working as fast as you can to get the vessel out is not essential, not for the shipping line, and certainly not for the terminal. So rather work a bit slower, saves cost, and you're still on time to make the arrival on your next port of destination.
And that really, if you want to measure that really requires KPIs of the next level. I think what I've seen in a lot of terminals is that there is, you've got execution, you've got the planning, and then you've got the trade which is coming in. And all these are kind of connected, but they do have different kind of KPIs which interfere or are in essential sometimes conflicting in
Absolutely.
In that sense.
Yeah.
And then it really becomes hard.
I mean, take the example of the KPI key crane productivity. So terminals are always benchmarking each other on key crane productivity. Well, that's a nice KPI, but what does it mean? Well, for your customers, certainly it doesn't mean anything, because they are interested in berth productivity, or even better, port stay. How long do they actually stay in from the arrival at anchorage until they really leave the port? That's what they're interested in. That needs to be predictable. That needs to be reliable. And that needs to be controllable, depending on the situation that if they arrive late, maybe they want to shorten their port stay. So they need flexibility from the terminal to speed up through berth productivity. And maybe that requires higher crane productivity. But the crane itself is just one small piece in the whole machine. So that focus is the wrong focus in the first place. So there's a big disconnect between how shipping lines assess their port visit and how terminals see their productivity, their performance towards the shipping line. So there's a lot of work in that area to align those KPIs and to work towards the same goal. And that's this reliable port stay. That's in the end what counts.
And the fact that it's so complicated to fix, is that directly related to the number of different customers you have on a terminal, that you need to have the conversation with too many because one will disturb the effect of the other one?
Actually, it puzzles me why this cannot be resolved. And when you look at this hub initiative from Maersk and APMT, they really focus on port stay rather than on crane productivity. I think there's a lot of historical approaches being used. Of course, for a terminal, key crane productivity is something they can quite well control. It's really within their control, in their comfort zone, so it's nice to measure yourself by. It's also very, let's say, comparable between terminals. Although it's not so important, it's something everybody has key cranes, so you can compare key crane productivity. Berth productivity, on the other hand, is an amalgamation of multiple. How many cranes do you deploy? How does it go over the port stay? How is the stowage on board? You may start with 5 cranes, but then in the end you have only 2 cranes. That all affects berth productivity. So it's, from a terminal point of view, less under control than purely crane productivity. So I think it's an artifact of history. Shipping lines simply asking, give me 3 cranes. No, they shouldn't ask for 3 cranes. They should ask for, I want to leave Saturday, 6 o'clock. Okay, then as a terminal, you have a clear KPI. This is what I need to work towards. And then you can optimize within that boundary how you're going to deploy cranes, how much yard equipment to support the cranes to get to a certain reliable departure time.
Yeah. So thinking about it conceptually, it's kind of the shipping line is stepping into, is picking up part of the responsibility that they shouldn't care about. They shouldn't ask that question.
No, and in a lot of contracts that they make with terminals, they still specify how many cranes they get. Irrelevant. Cut it out. Focus on reliable departure times. That's what in the end counts.
That is what we see as well. We do have this product where we actually can measure port stay, including drifting, including anchorage, time spent on anchorage, which is actually the entire port stay or the time that you as a shipping line did cost on that part. But terminals, it's very hard for terminals to take ownership on that part. It is really complex to link it to whatever KPIs they do have. They need to have KPIs. But again, if you move towards the people on the shore, at the terminal,
But awareness of that entire process and to see how they can play a role in making that process efficient, so that when you finally depart, your bunkering is also done, the tugs are ready. That, in the end, as a terminal, improves your overall service level. What good does it do if you're 5 hours earlier than you really can leave? No. That's a waste of resources. That helps no one. So I think they should look at that holistically. From a really, port stay is their product. And of course, they're not everything in their control, but still it's their product.
Yeah. And it has to do with complexity. I think engineers love to solve complexity, but I think as soon as people get involved, the kind of complexity, then it becomes a different game. It's still complexity, but on a different level, so to say. Yeah. And it requires a lot of talking, a lot of data, a lot of convincing due to historic reasons as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we already touched on many of the topics, but is there something that the audience who is listening to this podcast really also should know about the industry? What is the key thing that people are not understanding about terminals, or maybe about port calling in essence?
Yeah, so I think one thing that for me is essential that we need to tackle this as an industry, and that's the lacking quality of information. So we are exchanging a lot of information. We even defined long time ago the EDI protocols for that. Mm-hmm. And when you look at reality, to what extent those standards are adhered to, it's extremely poor. There's so much conflicting information going around. One message says this is going to be a reefer and you need to plug it in. And the next message from a different party arriving at the terminal about the same container tells, no, this doesn't require any power. What should a terminal do with that? So I think generally, quality of information needs to be tackled. Of course, we focus a lot on information exchange and making things more visible, but the quality itself needs to be right. Otherwise, it's not usable. And to feed conflicting or wrong information to systems, to automated systems, is only creating more problems. And so they cannot determine whether this is really a reefer or not a reefer, right?
Yeah.
If something is conflicting, there's a human needs to intervene. When it is one container for a call of 5,000, it's fine. But when it's 500 problems with conflicting information, it becomes a huge task for people to handle. And that's everywhere, ongoing. So the quality of information is extremely poor, and we need to tackle that. And there, maybe AI can help in recognizing patterns, automatically improving the quality of information. I would see opportunities there, and my hands are itching when I see this problem. But yeah, that's something that a lot of people underestimate.
And if we look at industry initiatives like DCSA, where they are setting standards, they are defining interfaces, is that already tackling this quality problem, or is that...
No, I feel that within the definitions that are there, people are still extremely sloppy with what they put into the data. And that's generally still human control, human input, meaning also human error. And simply not being penalized for it either. And so when they provide bad information, nobody is telling them, hey, this is going to cost you. No, there are teams on the other side, on the receiving side, who try to solve it and making phone calls and trying to fix it.
The firefighting mode, which
Absolutely.
the industry is known for.
Yeah.
So would a way to solve it be in the contractual area, that people would make agreements on what is the quality that we are putting into the system instead of the number of cranes?
I would generally think that incentives which focus on good and bad behavior always work when they're monetary. And so when there's a very clear measurement of data quality, and you pay for every mistake you make.
So great point about the quality information and putting a benefit or a fine towards that. Are you aware of any initiatives in the industry that are going on to actually tackle this problem?
Yeah. Well, I think an important initiative is the one heavily pushed by MSC. The largest shipping line is the electronic bill of lading. It has been spoken about for 20 years, but it's now really happening. As much information you can put already from the origin into electronic format, the less chance of error by typing from paper into systems and so on. So I think that will contribute a lot. Another more technical, let's say, innovation, also around for quite some time, but now maturing, is the tag on containers. So what we do around the world is every time when a container arrives, we try to identify this container. We do that by cameras, but as you know, containers can be damaged, they can be dirty, it can be difficult to read those numbers. So a lot of errors are being made there. If every container around the world would have a tag, which exactly tells not only which container it is, but also additional information about where it's going, for instance, or which cargo does it contain, what is the status of this cargo. There are now various tag suppliers who have invented tags which actually are able to live without any additional help. So the battery lives long enough to sustain for long periods in a ship, in a dark hold, and still tell location and whatever information is required. So that will also improve the quality of recognition of our main unit of loading, and that's the container.
And that's the process of the container, or the container as an object. If you think about a port call and the vessel arriving at berth, do you see any things going on in that space? I think the coordination of ETA is one of the things.
Yeah. Well, basically, if you leave your previous port, so let's say a ship sails from Le Havre to Rotterdam, you can predict already quite well what's going to happen and when it's going to arrive, when it's going to need the resources in the port, the tugboats, the pilot on board, to make sure that this journey gets a very efficient and smooth journey. Tech is playing a role there. Several others are also trying to use all kind of technology to predict better, provide this information to all the stakeholders, in a port visit, and not just the terminal, but the others as well. And
Yeah, I think a lot is happening in that space, but it's complex. Again, the port calls 28 up to 28 stakeholders who are involved in one or the other way.
Yeah.
Some of them might not have that big of an influence, but there are quite some who do have a significant influence on that. And making sure that bunkers are delivered, or that the pilot is available, or tugs are available, is really key.
Yeah.
Cool, Yvo. I really love to have this chat with you. I could go on for quite a while. I think
certainly could.
The complexity of the networks, and I had a lot of different questions, but we'll take that one offline. I really want to thank you for being in the.
Thank you for your kind invitation. I really appreciate it.
I really liked it. Thank you.
Thanks.